Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're going to talk about a literal naval battle in the Strait of Hormuz, a CIA report that basically contradicts everything Trump has been saying about Iran, the US selling billions worth of Patriot missiles to Gulf states while Europe gets nothing, Saudi Arabia quietly pulling the rug from under Washington, and Trump's tariffs getting slapped down by courts again. Okay, let's get into it. So this week things got hot in the Strait of Hormuz. US Central Command confirmed that Iranian missiles, drones and small boats attacked 3 American destroyers in the strait. The US military said it neutralized all threats and then went further, hitting Iranian military targets responsible for the attacks: missile and drone launchers, command and control centers, intelligence nodes. Iran, for its part, accused the US of violating the ceasefire first, claiming the US had shelled an Iranian tanker heading toward the strait, and that the attack on the destroyers was retaliation for that. Here's the wild part though. After all of this, Trump went in front of reporters and said the ceasefire with Iran is still in effect. He described the exchange as a minor thing, said that the destroyers sailed through under fire and came out undamaged, and that Iranian drones were, and this is a direct quote, burned in the air like a butterfly falling. Very poetic. And as of today, May 9th, the US military fired on Iranian oil tankers trying to bypass the blockade. Trump's response? Same playbook. They trifled with us. We blew them away. Ceasefire still in effect, apparently. He also threatened Iran with major consequences if they don't sign a deal soon. But here's the key thing to understand. Trump wants to keep calling this a ceasefire no matter what happens because if he formally declares war, he needs congressional approval. And Congress might actually say no. So expect him to keep framing every single exchange of fire as not really war. On the negotiations front, things has moved fast. The US presented Iran with a 15-point framework. Iran responded with its own 14-point counterproposal, demanding the war end within 30 days, guarantees against future military aggression, US troop withdrawal from the region, an end to the blockade, war reparations, the lifting of sanctions, and a new mechanism for governing the strait. Trump said on Friday he was not satisfied with Iran's offer, then on Saturday said he was still reviewing it. As of tonight, he's expecting a formal written response from Tehran. Rubio said he hopes it's a serious offer. We'll see. The main sticking point remains Iran's nuclear program. Iran wants to push that to a later phase of negotiations, while the US has insisted it be central to any deal. No breakthrough yet. Now let's move on to the second topic, the CIA report. Iran is not done. So this is the most important story of the week and it completely contradicts the official US narrative. A CIA assessment, which was classified, sent to the White House and then, of course, leaked, tells a very different story about how the war is actually going. Here's what the intelligence community found. Iran can survive the Hormuz blockade for at least 3 to 4 months, possibly longer. Despite weeks of intense US airstrikes, Iran still has a massive, largely intact arsenal of rockets and drones. The CIA estimates Iran retained around 75% of its mobile missile launchers and roughly 70% of its pre-war missile stockpile. Compare that to Trump, who just days ago said Iran's missiles are mostly decimated at 18 to 19%. That's a massive gap between what the president is saying publicly and what his own intelligence community believes. Even more surprising, Iran has reportedly been repairing damaged missiles and even assembling new ones in underground facilities. Drone production is continuing in small, easily hidden workshops. And the blockade? Iran is getting around it by offloading oil onto other tankers in the middle of the sea. Satellite images have confirmed this. And by transporting oil overland by truck and rail through Central Asia, potentially through Russia, via the Caspian Sea. One former Israeli intelligence official who spent years tracking Iran put it bluntly: even if the blockade lasts several months, it will not force the regime to surrender to Washington's demands. His exact words were something like, "The problem is they don't think they need to capitulate." That's the mirror thinking trap. Americans assume anyone in Iran's position would give up. Iran doesn't see it that way. The conclusion of the leaked report is stark. What started as a war supposedly aimed at dismantling Iran's nuclear and military capabilities might actually end up making the Iranian regime stronger, more radical, more determined, and still in possession of significant missile capacity. Okay, the next topic is Patriots for the Gulf, not for Europe. Here's a story that's very relevant if you're watching from Europe. The Trump administration just approved the sale of thousands of Patriot interceptor missiles to Kuwait, the UAE, and Bahrain, worth about $17 billion total. Qatar is also buying around 1,000 interceptors for another $4 billion. We're talking about roughly 5,000 plus Patriot missiles going to Gulf states. To put that in perspective, Raytheon and Lockheed Martin combined currently produce about 600 Patriots per year. So this is basically a decade's worth of production. The State Department bypassed congressional approval by invoking a national emergency, citing the situation in the Middle East. And here's the uncomfortable truth for European NATO allies. The US has been pulling Patriot stockpiles from Europe and Asia to support the Gulf War effort. Those deliveries that were promised to countries like Poland, they are delayed because there simply aren't enough missiles to go around. On top of that, the US military itself used about 1,300 Patriots during this conflict, nearly 3 years' worth of its own annual production. America's own war readiness has taken a hit. Pentagon officials have acknowledged that military readiness for other potential conflicts has been significantly weakened. That includes the Pacific, where the biggest strategic threat, China, is sitting and watching. Okay, let's move on to the next topic. Saudi Arabia quietly pulls the plug. This one didn't get enough coverage. When Trump announced his plan to escort commercial ships through the Strait of Hormuz, called Project Freedom, Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman was reportedly furious. Why? Because he hadn't been consulted, he hadn't been asked. And he knows that Iranian missiles can reach Riyadh just as easily as they can reach a ship in the strait. So Saudi Arabia and Kuwait closed their airspace and bases to US operations related to the escort mission. This is a big deal because escorting tankers through the strait requires heavy air support from fighters and attack helicopters. Without the ability to fly over Saudi territory or use Saudi bases, the operation becomes basically impossible. Trump paused Project Freedom, claiming it was because of great progress toward a peace deal, but no actual breakthrough had been announced. The real reason, according to US and Saudi officials, was that the Gulf states pulled the plug. Here's the updated part though. Saudi Arabia and Kuwait have since restored access to their bases and airspace, but only after the US struck Iranian targets in retaliation for missile attacks on the UAE. The reason the Saudis and Kuwaitis pulled access in the first place? They were furious that US officials had publicly downplayed the Iranian missile strikes on the UAE, effectively signaling they wouldn't have their backs if they were hit next. That's a significant crack in trust, even if it's been temporarily papered over. Mohammed bin Salman has been on a different trajectory for a few years now. After getting burned by the Yemen war, which Saudi Arabia essentially lost, suffering Houthi incursions into its own territory, he pivoted to diplomacy. In 2023, he restored diplomatic relations with Iran, brokered partly by China. He wants regional stability because it's essential for his Vision 2030 economic transformation plans. The bottom line: Saudi Arabia is increasingly unwilling to be dragged into a war it didn't choose, and Trump's chaotic, unilateral approach to the conflict is fracturing the very coalition he needs, even if the surface relationship is holding for now. Okay, the next topic is Trump's tariffs keep losing in court. Quick but important update on the trade war front. A US federal trade court just ruled that Trump's 10% global tariffs, imposed under Section 122 of the 1974 Trade Act, are illegal. The court found in a 2-to-1 ruling that Trump misused the statute, which is designed for genuine balance of payments emergencies, and instead applied it to a general trade deficit, which is legally a different thing. The panel sided with a group of small businesses that challenged the tariffs, calling them invalid and unauthorized by law. This is actually the second major tariff defeat. Earlier this year, the Supreme Court struck down a previous set of tariffs imposed under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, and the government is now in the process of returning more than $166 billion to importers, with first payments hitting accounts this week. And what was Trump's response to that? He said, "We had two radical left wing judges voting against us. Nothing surprises me in the courts." And then said they will just do it differently. The problem is that doing it differently is getting harder. Two of the main legal vehicles Trump has used to impose tariffs unilaterally have now been invalidated. Any new approach will likely require proper federal investigations, which take months. All of this weakens his negotiating hands significantly, including heading into talks with China next week. Okay, and the last topic for today is Africa is pushing back on America first. A quick but telling story from Africa. The US has been trying to replace traditional foreign aid, which used to flow through USAID before Trump shut it down, with a transactional model. Countries sign agreements where they essentially fund more of their own healthcare and development in exchange for American access to their natural resources. Zambia is one of the biggest flashpoints right now. It's a major copper producer and has significant lithium and cobalt reserves, exactly what the US wants for tech and defense supply chains. But the proposed deal leaked, and Zambians weren't happy. Their former health minister said any agreement that trades human lives for access to critical minerals is immoral. Ghana and Zimbabwe outright rejected the deals. Kenya signed, but a court blocked it. And here's what makes this geopolitically significant. The countries pushing back hardest are some of the most pro-Western governments in Africa. Zambia's current president was literally backed by the US and came to power promising a pro-Western direction. If the US keeps pushing this approach, it will drive these governments straight toward China, which already dominates mining operations across much of the continent and doesn't attach these kinds of conditions to its deals. Okay, so to sum it all up, the US is fighting a war it's having a hard time winning, with missiles it's running out of, against an enemy that's more resilient than advertised, while its key regional ally is quietly distancing itself. Its tariff strategy keeps getting struck down in court, and its foreign policy in Africa is backfiring in real time. Alright, thank you for listening and see you in the next video.